Raven Software are like the yin to id Software's yang, the Sunny to their Cher, the John Lennon to their Yoko Ono. If these two development companies were real people, they'd be best bros. Okay, you get the picture. Every time id Software brought out a new game engine, Raven Software wasn't far behind, nabbing the engine for themselves and doing great things with it. So who better to give the reins to for their much coveted Quake franchise than Raven Software? I'm obviously talking about Quake IV here, the first major game in the series to not be developed by id Software. Moving back to a single player focus after Quake III, Quake IV was released in 2005 for Microsoft Windows and the Xbox 360. It was a game that brought a definitive end to the Strogg storyline, putting you in the shoes of a man named Matthew Kane, one certified badass, or so we're told.
Matthew Kane, one certified badass.
A man like Kane could get us killed.
Okay, so quick history lesson. In Quake II, the storyline goes that mankind is at war with a mechanical alien race known as the Strogg that seek out other life forms to assimilate them with their own species. In Quake II, you played as a lone marine stuck behind enemy lines on the Strogg homeworld Stroggos, in a mission to destroy the Strogg commander, the Macron. So now in Quake IV, the campaign picks up shortly after these events, with the Strogg essentially on their last leg, but in no means are they going down without a fight. As Kane, you're part of the legendary Rhino squad, heading back to the Strogg homeworld to finish them off once and for all. Straight off the bat, you'll notice Quake IV has a much bigger focus on teamwork than it did in the past. Rarely are you on your own, you're frequently accompanied by one or two of your Rhino squad members, if not just other soldiers in general. Each of the members of Rhino Squad are unique and funny guys. The real scene stealer is a dude named Johann Strauss, voiced by Peter Stormare, who's a prodigal tech geek with a god complex.
Hello, Corporal Kane. It's good to finally meet you. You mean it could take several minutes before we receive any backup? I am Private Johann Strauss, you have no doubt heard of me. But I need protection, Lieutenant. You assign me only one guard? Must I die to show you how valuable I am?
You'll be interacting with your teammates frequently, and there's always someone on the other end of your radio, either giving orders or just chiming in with their thoughts. They can be a bit of a nuisance sometimes. When you're fighting alongside 2 or 3 of them, they have a tendency to block you in, which can be a bit of an issue if you're trying to head for cover to reload, only to find some idiot standing in your way. You've just got to be mindful of where they are at all times. About a third into the game, you're captured by the Strogg and half turned into one of them before your bros rescue you at the last minute. All this ends up changing with the gameplay is that you're able to move much faster and you're also given 25 extra health points, but in terms of the story, it means you're now able to infiltrate and access secure Strogg locations, which eventually turns the tide of the war. Now this sounds like a lot of story crap to contend with, but it really isn't. You're rarely required to just stop dead in your tracks and listen to expositional dialogue, and most of the time you're running around shooting things. Luckily, the shooting in this game is pretty damn good. Fans will love seeing the return of trademark Quake weapons like the nail gun, the hyper rifle, and of course the railgun. Most weapons are given minor upgrades as you progress through the campaign, and like before, each weapon will work for better or worse in certain situations. The nail gun, for instance, can be upgraded to lock onto enemies, and the railgun can be upgraded to pierce multiple enemies. Near the end of the game, you get a weapon called the Dark Matter Gun, which shoots out these little black holes, sucking in any unfortunate Strogg caught in its radius. Awesome. You start off with a machine gun and an energy pistol, which you probably won't use for too much longer, but they're the only 2 weapons which give you access to a flashlight, so they will come in handy at certain points. Other weapons include a grenade launcher, which is great fun to use once you learn the physics of the grenades, and the old trusty shotgun. The enemies themselves are largely just reskinned and updated for the Doom 3 engine, which looks amazing by the way, with gorgeous dynamic lighting and impressive animations. You don't really see games put this much effort into lighting anymore, mostly because FPS games are all open world nowadays, but the way the light has been painted in some of the environments in Quake IV is downright artistic at times. The gameplay feels more like Quake II than it does Quake I. Often you walk into an area and half a dozen guys come at you from a nearby entrance. There will be an enemy that rushes up to you for a melee attack and a few guys hanging back from a distance. It's great old school style design, forcing you to choose the importance of enemy types to take out first, and the controls are smooth and fluid. Then you get those moments when the game stops throwing bad guys at you and it actually does a 180 and becomes quite tense and atmospheric, as you're waiting for some asshole to lunge out at you. On this note, playing Quake IV on hard mode is pretty much a must. On the lower settings, the game is just way too forgiving. It's only on the hard modes where you have to learn the attack patterns of enemies and make sure you're using the right weapon for the job. Certain explosive weapons like the grenade launcher have a huge area of effect, and you come up against other Marines turned into Strogg who use the same weapons as you, and you really have to use your wits and make sure you're not playing like a total dingbat, or these guys will tear you a new one. Now, I can remember people absolutely hating Quake IV when it was released, and I'm always a little bit dumbfounded by that. I mean, I can admit some of the complaints are valid. It certainly doesn't feel like a Quake game at times. It can feel like something of a generic shooter.
Intelligence Division has discovered that the Strogg function through a massive communication system called the Nexus.
Also, a lot of the environments are very reminiscent of Doom 3, but that's not really a bad thing. There's a few missions where they put you in a vehicle or on a turret, and I'll admit, these are just horrible. They drag on for far too long and they're kind of ugly visually, but overall they're just not that fun to play. You're given regenerating health and armor in these levels and it just feels out of place. It feels more like a way to increase the game's length, and as soon as I get into them, I just already want them to be over. Controlling the mech suit, for instance, feels very clunky. I mean, imagine if someone told you that you weren't allowed to turn your head. You just kind of had to rotate your entire body where you wanted to look. That's what it feels like. Yeah, it's dog shit. Luckily, you're only subjected to these types of levels 3 or so times in the entire campaign, of which there are 30 or so levels all up. So when you get to these bits, just clench your teeth and breathe deeply, knowing that it's not going to last. Also, certain boss battles kinda suck and feature some damaging attacks that are really hard to avoid. But aside from these minor irritations, there's really not anything else glaringly wrong with Quake IV. Getting it running in Windows 7 is fairly easy, though you have to tweak the config file so it works with newer video cards, but this took me all of 30 seconds. Quake IV on the whole is a fantastic experience. It uses old school shooting mechanics at a time when those types of games were pretty much on the decline, thanks largely to the release of Call of Duty II. I mean, it's got quick saves, fixed enemy placements, fast movement speed, and a dozen weapons you're magically able to hold onto all at once. Sure, it's got the gung-ho Marine stereotype characters, and there's lots of military lingo and jargon in the cinematics, but this is an old school shooter at heart, and a damn good one too. It's even got the old conveyor belt level where you move down a factory line avoiding various industrial hazards. Classic. Quake IV is often considered the black sheep of the franchise, and it really shouldn't be. It's a suitably challenging and enjoyable game worth checking out for any serious shooting game fan.